And I'm a strong believer that, as I said last time, it can be fixed. All aberrant behavior, all the pathology can be absolutely resolved. It's like taking the poison out of the blood and letting the system, fix all the other problems. We've already addressed it was trauma, and that our ego tried to appease this trauma in a pretty effective, but one could say, problematic way of splitting itself. Consciousness, like a circuit board, just gets shattered into millions of pieces. And the biggest piece kept on buzzing, and that's the ego. We're basically schizophrenic. And this has to be healed, the antipathy to nature, the technology. The worst type of technology is a syndrome form, a symptom of the recentness of the trauma that caused these things historically. So we're still smarting from it. Then we said that's both good and bad, isn't it? Because it means we could be in a healing cycle if we're just left alone, the patient's just left alone. But Big Brother goes, well, we can't have that. We can't have them recovering. Look how much money and hay we're making out of the fact that they're all invalided. Don't let it off. So now as the healing begins, and that's what you're seeing, the healing that people say, the awakening, is this healing that is taking place, and quite broadly as well. But the Big Brother knows that's the last thing they want. So you've got to create a lot of noise and chaos so that it doesn't happen. And the talk would not be complete if we're going to look at the anatomy of tyranny and the anatomy of evil. You have to balance it by then looking at the anatomy of the selfhood that is the main thing that's under attack. Eigenwelt is under attack. So what really constitutes Eigenwelt? We won't have the full picture until we look at that. In other words, in the Disciples of the Mysterium, I brought the point up of what is the greatest philosophical words ever said? What is the greatest, wisest things that I've ever said? And I've said before, it was not thy soothon. Right? Know thyself. I mean, it's faster to write down than Mel Gibson's autograph. And they're the wisest words ever written. Know thyself. Self-realization is needed before God-realization, said the Vedics. The unexamined life is not worth living, said Socrates. And this know thyself obviously alludes to the Eigenwelt, the inner environment. There's an outer environment and there's an inner environment, an inner landscape. But the second greatest word, the second most deep and meaningful, utterly meaningful word, when it's used in the right context, when it's used in its purest concept, and I might also say Blakean concept, since William Blake was the only one who used it in the right context, is this word. We're re-examining what words mean. The inner environment and the total knowledge, that's not just mind knowledge, not just heart knowledge, not just body knowledge. The total knowledge that is ancestral, that is that memory of the total knowing. The closest word, the best word to use is imaginatio. Imagination is the word for that. And what the imagination can do is, again, the sparks of what once the whole mind was able to do. The interesting thing about imagination is that it exists in everyone, whether you like it or not. Even in some of the most destructive people, in fact, they have sometimes the most vivid, if perverted, imagination. Its existence is simply remarkable, simply mysterious. We never give it the thought that it's due, nor do we cherish it as much as we should. And the thing is that just like an external world, an external landscape can be beautiful, manicured, so should the inner world be beautiful. A stone can't imagine what it is to be a human, but a human can imagine what it is to be a stone. A human can think, what would it be like to ride Pegasus across the skies, a deep sea dive, to ride with Genghis Khan, right? To swim with the dolphins, or be stuck in the bloody Antarctica or whatever. You can do it. If I had to bring a physical horse in here for you to ride down the street and on through the grass, it would take time, distance, space, and speed are all involved. All the matrix of the Maya is involved. You can do it in here in a second. It doesn't even take time. You're already doing it. As I speak, it was done. That is it. Now, imagination works in practical ways, like you project your vision of yourself into the future. You own the future because you project a vision of yourself as what you're going to do and the goals you're going to attain. Origin said, you yourself are even another little world and have within you the sun and the moon and also the stars. William Blake, he said that in your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold, though it appears without, it is within. In your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. He's saying your imagination is greater than the world, greater than the universe. He says the eternal body of man is the imagination. The imagination rises from the mind's abyss and seeks more expanded senses than the five making up that abyss. In so many decades recently that scientists have found there's 37 sensory inputs to the brain. D.W. Winnicott, the psychologist, says, can you see the one essential way in which science and intuition contrast with each other? True intuition can reach to truth in a flash, whereas science, the whole truth is never reached. Even the scientists will admit this. The Microsoft people, Tesla, so many people say, yeah, I got it in a flash. Completely materialistic scientists will tell you it just came to me in one big flash. Who will die before they'll talk to you about imagination and right brain and spirit and all that. How is it done? Sigmund Freud said the decisive rules of logic don't apply in the imagination, or as he would put it, the unconscious. We would call it the empire of the illogical. It will always remain illogical while we imagine that this world of the lie is logical. Then of course it's going to be logical. If this is the world of light, it will always be the world of darkness. We have formulated this dualism for ourselves. In imagination, something else remarkable is really there, whether you realize it or not. Whatever comes there on the screen of the imagination, you don't need proof for. It's also timeless. But when you're running around in the world and want to prove to your neighbors everything you know, time is required and proofs are required. Otherwise it doesn't work. But in your own head, whatever goes on there, you don't need the proof. It's happening. It's spontaneous. And you don't invent your thoughts. They come from some place. We gotta run around, have our energies appeasing the disbelief of idiots. And if we succeed in doing that, oh, now it's suddenly true. If you don't succeed, you're an outcast. Robert Temple, he said the beginnings of the concept of dissociation are commonly attributed to Pierre Janet in 1889. Janet's interpretation is that systems of ideas are split off from the major personality, and exist as subordinate personality, unconscious but capable of becoming represented in consciousness through hypnosis. Janet was the first to introduce the term subconscious to refer to a level of cognitive functioning out of awareness that could on occasion become conscious. He goes on to say that in 1890, the psychologist Dr. Martin Prince remarked on the possibility of there being normally in all of us a lower stratum of consciousness which is alive to everything about us while the upper minds are busy. Well, long before him, Heraclitus was already onto it. This is before Socrates, right? He says, you could not reach the end of the psyche though you went the whole way, so deep is its nature. And he is the originator of the idea that don't try to have all-knowing, you preposterous idiots. That which is real is logos, ever-changing. It is live, it is vital, it is breathing, it is existing. What the hell is your stasis all about? Your Archimedean point is a joke. The whole universe is alive and moving. How can you know it? You can only experience it. Sigmund Freud said that nothing can be brought to an end in the unconscious. Nothing is past or forgotten. Factor in, as we've been doing all day long, deciphering, factor in the prehistoric concept. That makes even more sense than it did before, a few seconds ago. Because nothing can be brought to an end in the unconscious. Nothing is past or forgotten. You may have dissociated the idea of the trauma, but you can't dissociate its effects. They're going to work on every aspect, every level of the hierarchy of your being. One of the most extraordinary pioneers in the realm of psychology, George Rodak, in his book of the It, which in German is id, or the subconscious, he says it must not be forgotten that the brain, and therefore the intellect, is itself created by the id, or the it, they just call it the it. Long before the brain comes into existence, the id of man is already active and thinking without the brain. since it must first construct the brain before it can use it to think with. I mean, it's so amazing. Remember we spoke earlier about that nonsense with the I and the me, and they said, but you don't have an I until you have the you, the thou. Didn't work because at least to even register a freaking thou, there must be at least a nucleus of an I inside yourself. This man saw it years before. You've heard of Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Carl Rogers, Dr. Phil. When have you heard of George Brodek? Damn bloody good reason why you haven't heard of him. He says, this is the fundamental point and one we're inclined to ignore and forget. In the assumption that one thinks only with the brain is to be found in the origin of 1,001 absurdities. The origin also of many valuable discoveries and inventions, much that adorns life and much that makes it ugly. Over and against the id, there stands the ego, the conscious mind, the I, which I take to be merely the tool of the I, or the id, but which we are forced by nature to regard as its master. We got it inverted, right, with a hangman. We're back to front, inside out, and upside down. There's a primordial intelligence behind the chaos of the Charlie Chaplin monster that's rushing around, busy creating manufactured chaos. Later on we'll even see that this thing that you call the thinking brain, there are theories that believe that can move to the heart, to the stomach, to the leg. People read with their skin. Or a totality, obviously. It's ludicrous to just move it from here to there. That doesn't really, even magical as that will be, you really want that to be that interesting. But it would be interesting if the whole being becomes largely fully as intelligent. This is just a processor. And this is what he's alluding to, the vast intelligence of this other thing that has been forced into the shadows. And won't come out until you have the right way of seeing, the right call, the right way of asking. No angel is coming into your bird box with dirty feet. You must clean the house. The chalice that is already filled cannot be refilled. What did Lao Tzu say? From the emptiness, the window comes. From the nothing, the jug is made. Without acting, the sage accomplishes all. Leibniz, it is a great source of error to believe that there is no perception in the soul besides those of which it is conscious. Merleau-Ponty went further. It is a very great source of error to believe that in perception there's a subject-object dichotomy. Your very active perception sees objects and says, yes, they're outside of me. But my body's outside of me. Oh shit. Oh, I guess there's no duality then. Don't tell him about it. Don't tell us anything about it. Forget him. When he died young, that helps. The id, says Theodore Roszak, the id is that very proto-human psychic core that our evolution has spent millions of years molding to fit the planetary environment. Its seeming unruliness deserves a deeper understanding, if only because it grows from a long evolutionary history. In the course of that history, its dominant characteristics must have been selected for some good reason. If you're looking at one side of a storm, right, or one side of an ocean, it can look chaotic. You look at it from another point of view, it's calm. This so-called chaos that we call chaos is only the perspective we're taking of a false and pseudo and unsustainable fixity. The id, says Roszak, conserves from its long maturing process our treasury of ecological intelligence. Your unconscious maintains that treasury of ecological intelligence. The thing that brought the whole universe into existence, this is one of its tentacles, one of its voices. Its intractability stems from its deeply ingrained resistance to all social forms that endanger the harmony of the human and the natural. Its untamed selfishness represents a bond between psyche and cosmos whose distant origins reach back to the initial conditions of the Big Bang. Just as there is a wisdom of the body which often has a better sense of health than medical science, so too there may be a wisdom of the id that knows what sanity is better than any school of psychiatry whose standard of normality is essentially a defense of misconceived social necessity. Research shows that even under deep hypnosis, part of the mind remains aware. Hypnotists have loosely referred to this deep, subtle field of awareness as the self. It's also academically now, high brass, top of the academic totem pole, being given a new name, the hidden observer. After millions upon millions of dollars have been spent by SRI, Chicago Institute, the Hoover Institute, Stanford Research, Stanford, you name it. They now accept this fact. The chief of these experiments was Hildegard, Professor Hildegard. As for the deep self, presumed to be identical with Hildegard's hidden observer, standing partially outside of time, there is a great deal of evidence for this phenomenon. The fullest account of it is in the remarkable book Divided Consciousness by one of America's most noted psychologists, Professor Ernest Hildegard. In his book, Hildegard points out that the very word profound comes from profundus, near the bottom. Pay attention to the religious connotations. We're not meant to like bottom. We're not meant to let the depths. That's where hell is, right? Greg, another term for it that's creeping in from this duplicitous scientific community that now has to, through the back door, smuggle in the mysticism they kept out for centuries. But since they're so bankrupt themselves, they have no option now but to sneak it in through the back door. They call it the ancestral mind, don't you know? Greg D. Jacobs says of it, the ancestral mind arose long before logic or language appeared, and because it came online first, it has maintained its ability to operate as a separate system, quite independent from the thinking mind. The AM, the ancestral mind, learned to communicate emotional information intuitively, non-verbally, and non-consciously over the course of millions of years, and much of the emotional communication between people today is still non-verbal. It was the work of neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux that provided the physiological evidence for the key role played by the unconscious processing of our emotional life. His research not only confirmed the functioning of the ancestral mind, quite apart from the thinking mind, but also demonstrated that the brain itself gives priority to the unconscious messages that come from this older part of us. Jung says, we know that the mask of the unconscious is not rigid. It reflects the face we turn toward it. Hostility lends it a threatening aspect, friendliness softens its features. Well, now you know why a lot of people don't want to go into the unconscious. If it reflects the face that you've put towards it, if it mirrors you, and you're toxic, you're going to meet demons. No wonder it's been thrown into the darkness. No wonder the doors are closed and there's 50 foot of concrete, 50-foot steel walls in front of it. And that's why, as he goes on to say, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to stop from facing their souls, from looking at the unconscious, their own part of their own self, for goodness sake. Nietzsche puts it this way: why does man not see things as they are? Because he himself is standing in the way. He conceals things. Right? The ego, the pseudo-self, is standing in the way, preventing the higher self from doing its thing, preventing, literally gagging through mysterium, gagging through the noise of the externals, the Umwelt and the Mitwelt, so that the inner voice can never be heard. Again, the antipathy to nature, one of the origins of all pathology, coming itself out of the prehistoric trauma, helps us to improve the accepted psychological theories of the whole inverted cocktail of disorders. Clinching it to understand that the antipathy to the nature is antipathy to the self. The one is merely the more obvious phenomena, the more obvious betrayer that this is going on internally to the inner landscape. That's why I've always said I'm not that concerned about murder and killing and the various forms of evil that everyone should be up to speed on. I'm infinitely more interested in the kind of self-mutilation that goes on within the individual. Antipathy towards nature is ultimately antipathy towards the self. We have to learn it because Big Brother knows all about it. 17th century, Friedrich Schelling, the German philosopher, idealist, he said, nature is visible spirit, spirit is invisible nature. Now that is certainty. You can argue your way around it, you can have philosophies, schools of philosophies, you can ignore it. It is an absolute certainty that nothing can change. We can beat our heads up against the wall of it, but it never ever changes.
Oh wow,
How do you address it? Obviously, one factor we know from the description of it. In the equation of the antipathy to nature, it happened a long time ago. Right, Michael? You're saying it happened a long time ago. Right, so what can I do about it? You don't regress back to any ancestral time and say, let's unplug the cores. You don't need to. Nature's still around. You collapse time with that amazing thing you have called imagination. You go out and you say hello to her. You reintroduce yourself back to the mother. Now, not recreationally, not going out for walks and rock climbing, bungee jumping, skiing, and surfing. No, no, no. Go out in a totally different way, with a different way of seeing, and reintroduce yourself to yourself. But it's the outward manifestation of yourself, your Merkaba, your aura. And watch the wonder and the magic that will then take place as one by one these aberrant, mutilated sores in your psyche get healed. Because it can be done. It can be done more simply than you can imagine. But it has to be done alone, and it must be done one-to-one. And then you'll have nucleation. She's not going to call you. Why should you? Especially the toxic cannot go near that mirror. But you can go out there and say hello for the first time with all of your being, with a different voice. Not presuming something, not anticipating something, not expecting something, going for the walk, with no perceivable goal, no past, no future. Just let it guide you where you were meant to go. That is the shamanic way. Because the moment that you do anything but that, you're collectivized, even if it's to two. That person's system is not your system. My system is not his system. How could it be? It's an abomination to even think in those terms. If by some chance, as it probably will, that some of what you've done is similar to what they've done, so be it. That's part of the natural essence. But we don't sit down and compare notes. You can't afford to do that. And more likely, in the advanced stages, it isn't going to bear any resemblance to anybody else's experience. It will not. It will not. But we are scared of that experience. We're scared of that Siddhartha road. For all the reasons we've been pointing out in the early part of the talk. Vladimir Soloviev, the Russian writer, he says that it is time men realized their oneness with Mother Earth and rescued her from the lifelessness so they can also save themselves from death. But what oneness can you have with the earth when we have no such oneness, no such relationship with ourselves? Right to the heart of the matter. Again, to come down a step and make it more applicable to what we're talking about here, we turn to Nietzsche. Nietzsche had no time for reason, emotion, and all this other claptrap of philosophy. Historical paradigms and scholasticisms, and certainly not anything to do with Orthodox religion, and all the rest of it. He talked about the imagination, the total knowing, and he described it as aesthetic sensibility, the aesthetic life. Very long, very complex, but easy to summarize. He said that this thing that you call reason, that the technologists, right, the scientists we've covered, augment and say it's the greatest thing, and it is. But he said, how did that begin? Right? Man noticed the female menstrual cycle. He learned mathematics. Why should harm the moon and all that shit? Oh. Right? And then another factor took over. The patterns of the heavens, the patterns of the stars. Basically, in short, a thing called awe. All this happened, all thought, all curiosity, right? From digging the plants, from shearing the sheep, from grinding the corn, all that preoccupation with domestic minutiae and the eyes down, the Newtonian sleep of Blake, stopped because one day on a road, climbing a mountain, right, sailing a boat, some human, all humans, finally looked up and went, holy shit, what is this? What am I doing? Those men and women are your brothers. If there is oneness with anyone, it's to those people that you have a contact. Because they are exactly you. Because you must have it too. You must go out there and do it. There's a song by the band Rush called Permanent Waves. Listen to that song about the microcosm of the little pools of water that you see on the beach. And how that represents the totality of what is out there. So it doesn't need to be a grand experience. It can be a simple thing of just observing the furniture in your room and thinking, I have never noticed this before. I have never noticed that when I'm walking, I notice the pavement under my feet. As I enter a room, I never think of the door knob as I turn it and walk in. So a new way of imagining and knowing and seeing. With something that we do every day. It's very simple. It's also not time-bound. What did I just say? All men at all times of history, and all men in the future history, even in the monstrosity they're going to create for us, can do this. So it's not rational, it's not Hegelian, it doesn't require a certain period of time or history or a certain level of consciousness, and man was primitive before, you couldn't have done what you're talking about. No. The aesthetic experience is not only total, it is timeless. It can be done by anyone, anywhere. The shepherd on the hillside, the most primitive of men will do it. Sing hymns to it, chant it. Stare at it. But it is a very private experience. It doesn't require anyone else. Now the design, as we saw earlier, the design of our towns and cities prevents it. And also the fact that we're no longer really artisans. We're not truly in any type of productive relationship with nature or animals. So we see that a spontaneous response to nature's vastness and beauty is fundamental to healthy psychic existence, authentic existence. It is a direct and total experience involving mind, heart, and body. Right? A spontaneous response to nature's vastness and beauty is fundamental to healthy, authentic existence. It is a direct and total experience involving mind, heart, and body. It is not contrived and is, in fact, the self responding towards its own majesty. The aesthetic response is possible because of what we are, not what we have become. Patron Froese, a philosopher and expert on Nietzsche and Heidegger, says that it is important that human beings maintain a kind of awe with respect to the greater whole of which we are a part, since this not only provides us with an important fountain of meaning, but also prevents us from trying to engage in destructive conquest of the world which is our home. Our ancients did it right the first way. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's written right there that the pure ones, the noble ones, the Arya, do not kill even a small plant unnecessarily, not to speak of cutting trees for sense gratification. Aryans do not distinguish between lower and higher grades of life. All life should be protected. All living beings have the right to live, even the trees and plants. This is the basic principle of an Aryan civilization. Look at the mutilation that we do today. Talking about freedom and global village, while animals are dying in millions for nothing. We talked earlier about Fromm's necrophilia and Freud's thanatos. The opposite side of it, Fromm points out, is biophilia. Biophilia is the passionate love of life and all that is alive. It is the wish to further growth, whether in a person, a plant, an idea, or a social group. The biophilious person wants to be more rather than to have more. Alan Watts, he says, lack of knowledge about the evolution of the organic from the inorganic, coupled with misleading myths about the coming into this world from somewhere else, or from somewhere outside, has made it difficult for us to see that the biosphere arises or goes with a certain degree of geological and astronomical evolution. As Douglas E. Harding has pointed out, we tend to think of this planet as a life-infested rock, which is as absurd as thinking of the body as a cell-infested skeleton. Surely all forms of life, including man, must be understood as symptoms of the Earth, the solar system, and the galaxy, in which case we cannot escape the conclusion that the galaxy is intelligent. But we might not be intelligent enough to work that out. Yeah, that I can believe. And even dumber to know we're not intelligent enough to work it out. That I believe. He says, we do not come into this world, we come out of it as leaves from a tree, as the ocean waves, the universe peoples. Heidegger Fonte would say, look, I'm sitting at my desk. The paper is on the desk is on the carpet is on the foundations of the house. The foundations of the house is upon the topsoil. The topsoil is upon the earth is upon the universe, and the universe is upon something else. Right? The apple is on the tree. You can think of it as a separate entity if you want. But no, it's on a branch that is connected to a tree, that is connected to the roots, that's connected to the soil, that's connected to the earth, and back it into the nether, or the neter, or whatever you want to call it, the noumena. Everything that man makes, even his plastic, is borrowed from nature. And he says, we're inventors. On my resume, I'm an inventor human, you know. Everything you've got that you've made is from nature herself anyway. And everything you can't think of, including yourself at death, is going back there. Breath, cells, and all. Is this rocket science or something? But it is, if it is a narrow understanding. We come back to this main theme concept, way of seeing. We're going to visit this a lot now in the final part of this section, this concept. Protege of Gerald Massey, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, he says, look, and by God, is this one of the most powerful statements ever made, especially if you're up on Eastern philosophy, Eastern mysticism. The real Maya, or illusion, is not the natural forms, but the mind's propensity to conceive or project forms created by its own inventiveness, but which do not agree with the extant truth or potential in nature. There is no Maya. It's female too, they love that. Prakriti, Maya are female words, easy to denigrate. But he's saying, no, the Maya is actually your delusional thought about the Maya. Well, that doesn't answer a lot. That puts a lot of priests with a pink slip out of a job. Bye. The real Maya is your own thought about it. That's aberrant. That is mutilated. That is dysfunctional. And one of these delusions is this oneness concept that I've been talking about. It's part of this delusional way of seeing. We don't need the ancients to say it. The physicist, quantum physicist Werner Heisenberg admitted it. What we observe, he says, is not nature itself, but nature as exposed to our method of understanding. Kuhn goes on to say that thinking which does not start from and continue in close relation to its foundations in the physical universe must lead to falsity, as it does. Because anyway, it's not even thinking. It's not even thinking. Freud remarked on this, he knew this too, he understood this, that the roots of the disorders, he didn't say it in so many words, but he said it in other words, that the antipathy to nature can be healed, he said, as I am also adding, through what he referred to as oceanic experiences. Get out there. Get out there and be part of it, not in a recreational way, but as a sage, as a shaman, as a person who is stripping away from yourself as to having more. You don't want to do that anymore. You've got enough. You're burdened down with all the stuff you've got. You're doing it because you want to cleanse now and let go. And be learning from it all. That eagle has got a lot to teach you. Those clouds do. That movement of the water does. The shadows, the light, the changing landscape, the painting that she's putting on every moment of every day. Even in the industrial stockyard full of rust. Even in the dust on the table, even in the rotten apple, can you say that winter is more beautiful or less beautiful than summer? That a rotten flower, a dying rose is any less? You'd be a crazy fool to say, no, the real rose is more beautiful than the dead rose. That's impossible. It doesn't even make sense. Well, we've done it wrong, but they did it right. In the past, the Egyptians, for one, and many others, had a totally different relationships with that animal kingdom. In alchemy, the primal material was often represented by such monstrous and fabulous creatures, mixed forms of animals. In psychological terms, they would probably symbolize the original total consciousness. They do, that's it. Out of which the individual ego can rise and begin to develop towards maturity. Most of the gods that even the Christians worship are merely morphed out of Pan and Shiva and Pashupati and Herm and Cernunnos and the gods with the horns. Even Jupiter, most of the images of the god Jupiter, the Roman god, have the horns of wisdom and antiquity. They represent wisdom, but also the ancientness of it, the ancient history of the god, of what it is. When they went to the Dravidian Indians, the earliest peoples of the world, every time that they brought it, did you believe in a god? Yeah, and let me see, have you any images of him? Every time they brought the earliest images of God out, that God wears horns. Mostly the antler of the deer. The respect that they had, they elevated the animals to the realm of God. What does that mean? What does that tell us? You can't know because the Christians are screaming at you paganism before you can even get the thing straight in your head what it's all about. Pope Pius IX did not even permit a society for the prevention of cruelty to animals to be founded in Rome because, as he declared, theology teaches that man owes no duty to any animal. When we're talking about the unconscious and getting into it, and Jung also pointed out that it's whatever we point into it. It's beautiful. That is heavy. That's very heavy. He's almost alluding to that there really isn't any unconscious. That which we call unconscious is really the face we reflect back at it. It's some sort of weird Star Trek mirror going on here. Some weird metallic mercurial plasma that you have to look into and find yourself, like in Chakari, the Final Frontier. That's what the bozo Vulcan does. Goes and meets God, and then has a punch-up. Finds out it's himself inflated. Great. But again, back to the idea of the fallacy of the unconscious being a location or an area, some dark internal, mental cellar. This doesn't work. Why? Grodeck will explain it. Grodeck is most careful to insist that the id or the it is not a thing in itself, not a place, not a region, not a state even of mind, really. It is merely a way of seeing. So those with a psychological background, or those who know psychologists, you need to bring this up to them. It's obviously not a place. I mean, that's obvious. But what is it? It is a way of seeing. We started with this in the beginning. The unconscious, the id, that ancestral love is just simply a way of seeing, and that's what gives you the hook to know that you can change it. And without psychologists or psychiatrists or anybody, if it's a way of seeing, and my way of seeing is changing all the time anyway by everything that's happening to me, but I have imagination and I have the will to change my way of seeing, that's a big one. That is a big piece of the puzzle to know what to do. It doesn't mean you won't change your way of seeing to something bad, potentially. You could narrow your way of seeing. We know we've done that. But it also implies, by the same token, that it can broaden through the imagination, through the aesthetic experience. In fact, talking a way of seeing, in Greek, the very word for I know, right, means I have seen. Right? The words, the etymology, it's perception, it's Ponty, it's Heidegger. Nietzsche said that when you look up and saw that all the other cognitive abilities began. Why not go back to it? If it was the origin, the awe of that which you did not create, and finally you realize I didn't even create myself, the simple awe, the all-permeating awe, which is a magical act, and a truly magical act is an act that involves the mind, the heart, the body, the soul, the spirit. The totality, that's a magical act. Sorcery is when it's just one thing, right? That magical act of having that awe started man to ask the great philosophical questions of life. Hegel admits it. Hegel's theory is based on exactly the same principle. He goes very deeply into this thing about the aesthetics. Very deeply into this thing about the aesthetics. That this primal response to the awe and the majesty and the beauty of nature, which the global village is meant to dumb you down or simulate so that you never get in touch with it, including the miracles of your own body. We'll get to that in a minute. Right? So this act of perception is enough. Act of perception. It not only nucleates duality, as we've already pointed out, it is the very key to the salvation of everyone and the self. Perception, nothing more. Observation. A certain kind. In harmony with that which is uncreated, negentropic, no beginning, no end. That new way of seeing, Grodeck and others were pointing out, includes, with a new vision of nature, a new vision of the body, since, as we've been pointing out time and time again, the body, the self, and nature are one. So what about the body? Julian Jaynes says that there is nothing in consciousness that is not an analog of something that was in behavior first. Now, a Christian or somebody from religion refutes this as being mechanistic. It's not at all. It's just their skewed perception. There's nothing wrong with that statement. It's perfectly true. Your brain replicates events that you have already experienced or seen, or are composites of things that you've seen and experienced in this world. Everything in your head absolutely is. There's nothing in your head that did not start in behavior and experience. You just have little pictures in your mind, or composite pictures of things that happen. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make it any less spiritual. Rollo May says that self implies world and world self. There is neither one without the other, and each is understandable only in terms of the other. The intimate connections between psychic and physical reality. Watt says the prevalent sensation of oneself as a separate ego, enclosed in a bag of skin, is a hallucination which accords neither with Western science nor with the experimental philosophy religions of the East. This hallucination underlies the misuse of technology for the violent subjugation of man's natural environment, and consequently, its eventual destruction. They pulled you so far out into the Umfeld that you imagine that this bag of skin with the ego is the real self. The aesthetic, steps on the way, the aesthetic journey will teach you the opposite of that. But when it comes to the body itself, right, psyche and body, the greatest exponent on that fact is Wilhelm Reich, who died in jail. He arrested, said, "You're done, pal." And to a certain degree, his protege, Alexander Lauen. And what they had to say is so misrepresented, almost makes you want to cry. And we'll just do a few minutes of justice to it. Is that the body that you live in is the ego. Don't think of, we've just examined that, don't think of anything to do with psyche, ego, id, superego as realms or some sort of, attics or dungeons or cellars. Throw that out. We're back to way of seeing, and we come back to this, that the very concept of an ego, the Reichians say, is the physical body itself, particularly the skin, meaning the surface of the body. They distinguish that the surface of your body moving out, of course we don't have time to explore all of this, but it's monumental. The surface of the body, which can also be described as upwards, is the ego of a person, facing the world, facing the sensations and the tribulations and the stimuli of the world. As you get into what they call the core, which is downwards, metaphorically, you're into the imperial self that we spoke of earlier. What has religion done to the terms down and under? And what have they done to up? Inversion of the very thing where we need to be going. Hidden observer is down in the depths, in the hell, if you like, if you use the true Scandinavian meaning of that word, and my God, could we get into the mess they've made of those words? Where does that sound familiar? Where have we heard this before? The core. Don't want to do too many comparisons. I'm loath to do that, because I'm very suspicious of the way Eastern teachings have become, but let's bracket that for a minute. And we've heard it before in the chakras and the kundalini, the serpent energy, the mezla, the fohat, whatever you want to call it, the shushumna, right? That central core could be a metaphor of what they're talking about. It's just the old Aryan teachings, nothing new under the sun. It's cellular intelligence. It's the movement of the skin, it's the lymphatics, my God, the skill, the iris, the menstrual system, the generative system, walking, the heartbeat, the sweating in the skin. The miracle of this is beyond belief, let alone the neurochemical and the sperm and the conception and all of it. How can we not be awed? Going back to nature includes this, the awe of this, the awe of a hand playing a piano. You think the head is the only thing doing the thinking? Actually, look at the thing called concentration. When you say, well, he's concentrating, the brain is not just concentrating, by the way, the whole body is in what we call concentration, but we just leave the body out. When you're in fear, doesn't your skin crawl? Don't your hands shake? Your breath becomes shorter? When you're embarrassed, doesn't your face redden? When you're angry, your legs tremble? When you're sorrowful, tears come to your eyes? When your whole gait and posture changes? When there's sexual arousal, well, that's it. The brain's completely gone. Body totally taken over there. It's a total dominion, which it likes, which is why we're turned on all the time. It's not that shit about pheromones and all that. It's the body thing. It's good. It's the one place you get to shut up and I get to go. It's a moment in the cage. Right? That's why sex is so powerful. Because it's the 1 minute that just goes, what happened? And the body is in its where it should be, which Nietzsche says. Come on, aesthetic life, ecstasy, tantra. What is this other shit that they give you, these Christian dogs? When you're in danger, right? The hair on the back of your neck. When you're in anticipation, the eyes widen. When you're in awe, your eyes widen. Your jaw drops. Infants putting things in their mouth. Why? To know what it is before touch has even developed. They're putting it in the mouth to taste it, to feel it. The body is knowing things before the brain, as Grodek says. And the surface of the body, this ego part, it burns out of energy because it takes a lot to deal with the physical world. So we sleep. We have sleep because we need to recharge only the surface of the body. The inner things, oh fuck, you gotta sleep now. Okay, I guess we'll just put on dreams then. Channel 4 dreams while the idiot sleep. Oh, tired. Yeah, you're extra, in fact you'll even notice it. They've even done, the skin changes, you get flaccid, you have to sleep and lie down, I'm sick, tired, and burned out. The inner core is going, Jesus Christ, half the life in sleep. It's still going. It's still going. The imagination never turns off, it's eternal. What happens with the human face? It moves from unreadable to histrionic and over the top, to repulsive, to oops, I think I insulted that guy's mule, I'm gonna die. Right? We are full conscious. That's why I said, what the hell do we need words for? Oh, it's well, language, remember, I'm me. I'm a Wittgenstein. I tell you all about language and how it divides the soul. We don't need language to communicate. We've got something else going on. called illustrators. Non-verbal behaviors we use to highlight aspects of the words we speak. They illustrate visually what the words are trying to say symbolically. Many people use their hands and gestures to illustrate and highlight their speech. We have regulators, non-verbal behaviors we engage in to regulate the flow of speech during a conversation. We use our faces quite often to signal what we are done or waiting, or even inviting someone else to speak, don't you? Our tone of voice regulates speech, informing others when we're finished speaking. In many cultures, gaze and visual attention regulate speech, as do gestures. A wonderful scene in the movie Spartacus. And the Kirk Douglas character, the only time he gets to touch his love is when she's handing him a bowl under the gladiators, and they're all sitting in the prison. And just the handing of the bowl and the fingers touching. That's it. What more do you want than that? They said the monks used to communicate with their feet. Well, the monks that never used to speak, they just learned to talk with their feet. The miracle of the body. Go to any person who teaches polarity therapy, or more importantly, Rolfing, because they never stop talking about it anyway. With a miracle of the spine. You shouldn't even be able to stand up. You know the one about the miracle of the bumblebee and what have you, but forget that. You shouldn't even be able to stand up. In fact, when they have a skeleton in the science room, note that it's got a metal thing going through it with a hook, and it's hanging up there to stand up. Take the hook away, and what will happen to that skeleton? Well, it should be happening to you. The cavity here, and the weight of your head, and the forward motion of the spine, and the fact that it's at the back, every single one of us should be doubled over all the time. There's no muscle there, there's no tissue there to support the spine, to walk and to carry the weight of the heart, the lungs, the head, and so on, and the skull, and yet the spine does it. How? Obviously, Wright would say through bioenergy, the flow of the bioenergy between these hemispheres. What have they done to the body? What have they done to the body that we're talking about, that is this aesthetic creature that's so intelligent? Christianity and religion have made it into a monstrosity, the prison of the soul, no less. And yet the body's where our spirit begins and ends. And Julian James has pointed out that the subjective space is a recent phenomenon. Right? Remember we said that, the internal space? Studies of primitive people shows that they have no words for emotions, or that their explanations of subjective and emotional states are restricted to explanations of the external space and situation, or to the sensations they had at that location. What? That they have no words for emotions. And if you describe that this happened, this moment of arousal when you saw this woman in your trap, their descriptions of it are of the place that it happened, and the sensations, the most external things that happened. The place, that means that the external world, which your ego is in touch with, was the first cognition. The internal space did not exist. And it also means that the ego, right, is the outer part facing the world. In simpler terms, it just means that we have an upper and a lower. We have the ego and the self. And the domain or dominion is down, under, in the Dante's Inferno that they've demonized for centuries. In the center of the core of the person is the still point. At the still point there the dance is, says T.S. Eliot. Examine Shiva, his pose. Examine 21, the card, the last card of the tarot. Why is she dancing? That is a stillness. That is a oneness, a true oneness, if you will, that underlies all other things. A wholeness should be a more accurate term. But really what's going on is that speaker and listener again. Because these two selves, shall we say, are really two voices. And they're interchanging and dialoguing. They're friends. This minute they're enemies the next minute, because that's the ever-changing way it is. You can't stop it. You can't educate people to have one voice only. There's a constant dialogue between the wise one, who is also a fool, and the fool who's also the wisest. In your very life, every single day, it's not in physical language, although that's part of it too. It is in physical language, but it's in biochemistry, bioenergy. The exchange of language between the inner self and its colleague, its twin self, Horus and Set. Set is the dark one, remember, who faces within. Horus faces out, he's the solar child, but Set put out his eye. Which means what? That Horus, for all his light, is half blind. Meaning he lacks inner sight. Set sees all. And Set is, by the way, the oldest god in Egypt. The goddess is older, but he is the first son of the first god in the oldest pantheon. This dialogue is the reason also for a lot of artwork, as we said, but also for a lot of mandalas. the square and the triangle. Right? The triangle is the inner core and the square is the outward core. They put them together to make a mandala. That is communication. Didn't see Wittgenstein talking too much about mandalas. But the 3 and the 4, the pyramid is 3-4. The cube is 3-4. There's a dialogue even geometrically, so to speak, the Vesica Pisces. So what we refer to as knowledge is the result of an endless and ever-shifting interrelation between the brain, body, and unconscious. Consciousness, as we call it, is the result of the exchange of information between these hemispheres or centers of intelligence. The result of the reciprocal dialogue. One network is forever discovering more about the other in an endless, but in a similar manner as we gain increasing knowledge about another person. This inner dialogue between bioenergetic hemispheres cannot come to completion. It is an never-ending, perpetual, vital process. That order out there is desperately trying to cut you into that mold, to murder, to dissect. To hold you down. Earlier we touched on the idea that maybe then this processor up here, I'm saying 2 cells, obviously it's infinite, isn't it? That's why the Egyptians had infinite God. The liver is talking, the skin is talking, the fingernails are talking. How can it not be? If I'm playing the guitar, it is not the brain that is playing the guitar. Something unbelievable is taking place. Absolutely unbelievable. The body is playing the guitar. The body is consciousness. The body is intelligent. So this processor we need. But theoretically, at least, that could move to some other place or take up the totality. As Grodek is saying, actually, it is just the administrator. And maybe in some other perfect world or with meditation, not that I'll try it, but this battery could be moved and become the whole self. This opens up a lot of interesting areas. We know now that there's neural cells in the heart. But the whole body can become a brain. And this exchange I'm talking about obviously flows between us all as well. The bioenergy exchange is between people as well, as it also is between self and nature. And David Matsumoto says that the English word intelligence is derived from the Latin word intelligentia, coined 2,000 years ago by a Roman orator, Cicero. We use the term intelligence to refer to a number of different abilities, skills, talents, and knowledge, generally referring to our mental or cognitive abilities. It's the totality. So if we're intelligent, it's not just this thing. That's just a processor that receives and transmits and collates. That's why it's hot. That's why we think we're thinking with this. We're not. We're absolutely not, and they prove it now. Even scientifically they prove it. One person who's going absolutely blue in the face about this is the singer Lisa Gerard from the band The Dead Can Dance. Endlessly going on and on about this dialogue. Open it up. Sing, speak to yourself, chant. The children chant, the baby moans, the baby is already singing. But it has to be your language. And language verbally is not just what, is the only level of communication. Obviously, we know that. But that's where do you think the mantras and the chanting and the hymns and even the prayers come from? The whole universe is in song. And we have this internal music, this internal dialogue playing between the music of the spheres. Beethoven was stone deaf, and it's going to compose the 9th century. What are you telling me? What are you telling me? And then you're going to tell me man is limited. How dare you throw that on my face? That this 9th symphony can be composed by a man who's stone deaf. And Beethoven himself said, if you understood my music, you'd never be having sorrow one more time in your life. Because it is the testament of something so immense. And so much of this creativity is. But the creativity comes from that imagination that is tuned in and is harmony with the bioenergy of the greater universe. I'm talking about the bioenergy of the body. What the hell? The bioenergy of the entire universe is also talking to you, but you've closed off. But it will never stop. See, here's the trick. You may wipe ourselves out. But as they said, the world will still be turning when you're gone. That is also a creative act, by the way. You participating in this inner dialogue has some other things I haven't yet mentioned about how unique and magical it is. The first thing is it's a truly creative act in the highest way of the magical creative act. The second thing is it is probably one of the only, and possibly even the only, act that the self does for and to the self. Self cannot be, the word self is absolutely made into a misnomer, a complete non-word, if you even think of another thing that somebody else does. A self can only act for itself. Nothing that it does, as Ayn Rand has pointed out, is for another person. Sorry, that's just the certainty. So then one would then inquire, what is the self to do that is of and for itself? It can only assert itself actively into this dialogue and become part of it. That is the act that it does for itself. I'm assuming there's other ones as well, but I really haven't come up with any yet. That's the main one. The active participation to silence the chit-chat and start listening to a song. Not as the Eastern pastors saying, well, you got to silence all that chatter in your mind. Do you see what we've been told? Do you see what we have been deluded to believe? What chatter in my mind? Well, yeah, anybody can tell you. I live in California, they always tell you. Well, it's very hard to meditate. I was really pissed off. I used to do it a lot, actually, but now I stopped. Yeah, I just can't silence that chatter in my mind. I got a lot of books on it, and I've joined a lot of cults and classes to deal with it, and I even follow a guru, Sai something, blah, blah, whatever his name, bloody my knee. Kumar Swami Ananda, such and such. And he's teaching me how to do it. Hold me back. Hold me back. What? More masochism? More self-sadism? That's just what you need. No wonder I wouldn't go psychotic trying it. No, don't stop it. Don't try that. Let it go. Participate in it. There's a dialogue of yourself to yourself taking place. Zaz says, in defining what a human being is or ought to be, language remains perhaps the single most important criterion. The idea that thought cannot exist without speech was implicit in the Greek language. Phrasomai, the Greek term for I meditate, means literally I speak to myself. The Greek term for reason also means speech. And I can illustrate this very easily. Haven't got time to do it physically, so let me just explain it. The guitar has 6 strings. You use a piano, any musical instrument will illustrate this. 6 strings. If I fret a note, and it's a major note, I don't know anything about music. I think I've written it down. Hang on. Let's just get this right for those Virgos who never stop emailing me. Well, no.
Ako, yan po, nagagawa ko yung mails. Yung minutes na yun, labai yung nilay ka.
I'm really sorry for that. There it is. Hard luck. If I fret the, if I play a D, open D, right? An open D note. I fret it at the E. And I'm assuming that's a major. I may be wrong on that, but it's a major. The very next note up is an F, which is minor. And if we had time to illustrate it, you'd see the complete different intonation. You'd hear that one is solar, one is feminine, lunar. One is feminine, the other masculine. The one inner, the other outer. Right? You'd hear it. You'd actually hear it. Go home and do it if you have a musical instrument. One is Horus, the other is Set. One is Shiva, one is Shakti. One is winter, one is summer. You'd hear it. But what has just happened? 2 completely distinct voices. 2 completely different realities, perceptions of the world. But on what? One string. One string. So really what we're seeing here is that the 2 voices are one. Or they're part of a greater whole that we have no conception about, because those are only 2 voices of that wholeness. That's why I reject oneness, because it gives you the connotative. You can use it if you like rhetorically, it's fine. We're talking philosophy here, so we have to be particular. That is a misleading term, because it's nucleating you, and that's wrong. Those are 2 voices, the yin and the yang, the nagwal and the tonal, the hadith and the nut. These are the 2 voices only that you're going to get in this dimension of a totality and a wholeness that is beyond our understanding and probably will always be, and that's okay, because you know something? You don't need it all. In a fractal and a hologram, those 2 notes are enough if you know how to hear and your way of seeing is attuned. Absolutely, there is the magic. So this illustrates that these are the 2 voices, but they're on one string, major and minor. So when we're talking about this, and we come to the concept of what they've called through the religious theological age, the higher self, we have to now look at that again. We've got to look and re-examine that term. Because as a matter of fact, what they're calling higher self is the body, is the you. It's not outside of you. The rhetoric makes you think it's God, it's behind the clouds, it's hiding, it's away, it's somewhere in some plane or some higher realm. No, it's contained completely within the temple that you are. Jung says that the body is, of course, also a concretization or a function of that unknown thing which produces the psyche as well as the body. The difference we make between the psyche and the body is artificial. It is done for the sake of better understanding. In reality, there is nothing but a living body. That is the fact. The psyche is as much a living body as the body is a living psyche. And that is basically the main thing so far, that the body and psyche are one. Like Schelling said, spirit is nature, nature is living spirit. The Church Fathers, according to Bishop Epiphanius, the Christ is the spiritual self within each person. Clement of Alexandria, the Church Father no less, the greatest of all lessons is to know yourself, for when a man knows himself, he knows God. Corinthians, you are the temple of God, for the temple of God is holy, and the temple you are. Origin, you yourself are another world, right? Remember that one? You have within you the sun and the moon, and also the stars. You do, the two polarities. You don't want to put manacles, mind-forged manacles on that dialogue, one silencing the other, because the other will starve to death. Most of the pictures of Horus and Set are what? One body, two heads, right? If one decides to turn against the other dies and becomes emaciated. In the Gospel of Thomas, when you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will know that you are the sons of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you are in poverty, and you are poverty. Hands up how many people know that term, harmony of the universe, you know, I'm in harmony with you, I want to be in harmony with the universe. Just that phrase, you must have heard millions of times. Well, the whole thing, the way I look at it is that, yeah, there's a harmony in the universe, all right. No. Just over here. There's a harmony in the universe, all right. But the universe, as I said, is negentropic and kaleidoscopic. The harmony is... The trick with this is that, and it's just kind of bad news actually. The universe is in harmony with you, absolutely. And the symbol, universal symbol for that harmony was the scales. Remember the Egyptian scales? But the bad news is that it's in harmony with you. It's in harmony with you, with what you are. So whatever you are, it's in harmony with, because it's a dance. And you'd learn this if you allow her to speak to you. I'm in harmony with you. So if you're toxic, psychopathic, and demented, I'm in harmony with you. And if you're elevated and you're in some other space, she's in harmony with you. You move there, something else happens. It's a complete yin-yang. We've got a completely bogus understanding of some harmony in the universe. You're in harmony, we're all right with it. But the harmony that in the Egyptian myth, they add one new thing as well. They say that to be in total harmony, balance, they're generous. They even told us one more thing. What is the universal symbol? You'll see it on the right. All that ultimate homeostasis with nature is the feather of Maat. The feather, the lightest thing they could come up with. But unlike the solar children of the light that they were promising us, the globalists, right? This light is completely different. And those who follow my work know what I mean by that. Light is of two kinds. Luminescence, right? I've seen their light of religion, and it burned me blind. That light, the solar light, the Atlas light, the merchants of light, the illumined ones, all them. And then there's this other lightness that they completely forgot about. The lightness in weight. The lightness of the fool, the first card, the lightness of the jester. That's what they're telling you is the true harmony of the universe. But there's a dark harmony of the universe that we need to be very aware of. And so it boils down to this idea of a changing perspective. We are, this is another one. The act, not only entering into the dialogue, right? It says act for and of the self. This other one is probably another one. The very simple fact that you can choose to change perspective from the pseudo-self to the imperial self is another act of the self for the self. An act of true free will. As a matter of fact, there's a whole school called phenomenology, and the word is this Clockeite's elaborate word for what a thing is. the description of a thing. So they say, like Jesus said, know the tree by its fruit, know a thing what it is. Well, the phenomenology of self is to see what it does. But it can only do what it does for itself. That's not limiting, that's very powerful. Because that little move here affects the totality around it. Another way of experiencing this is if you stand up, and what am I going to do? As soon as you stand up, I cannot occupy that space. If I do so, I have to jump on you in some hideous, ludicrous, comedic way, and then we're both tied up. Tie two birds together, though they got four wings, they cannot fly. I can't breathe for you. And I certainly can't think or perceive for you, no matter what the globalists, high priests, are trying to say. So existence is selfish. The very ground that you stand on is yours. The very lungs that you breathe with are yours. The thoughts and imagination that pass through your mind is yours. And I can violate it. I can choose to violate the harmony of the universe. But then, like that string, you've manually put it into disharmony, and you have chaos. You have disharmony. Get a bunch of people who are all disharmonious together, and they will soon be telling you that they're the most wonderful new form of avant-garde music. Well, that's what Tolkien opens his Silmarillion with. An immense expose, an amazing metaphor of this, in musical terms, by the way, of this very thing that he, as a Christian, believed happened at the beginning, where the disharmonious tried to convince themselves that this is better music than the harmony of God. In the most astonishing language, the most absolutely astonishing language was used to explain this metaphor. Not phenomenology, one more thing, one more anatomy of the self. It's defensive, almost purely defensive. In the most perfect way of defense, in the martial artist way, in the Aikido way, it moves. It's too light, you can't touch it. You come at it, and you're very coming at it, it's gone somewhere else. It's absolutely yin. It's the most defensive thing. And this is what Bruce Lee and others have tried to get through our skulls. But again, in simple language, Ayn Rand hits the nail on the head. What is true civilization? We know we've studied all the aberrant things today. What is civilization? Can we put our nail on the positive aspect, the solution? She says that civilization is a process of setting man free from man. The very opposite of what is taking place. Go your own way with no road map, not even one for you to carry because you don't need it. You're taken care of. Or if you want to make a map, do your own. No enslavement to priests and gurus, leaders, experts. No longer strangling yourself in the web of false ways to get free. Waiting for some gimmick merchant to sell you something. Blake, I must create my own system or be enslaved by the systems of others. Those are the certainties. I call it an anarchy of the mind. An attitudinal freedom. No master above, though. No slave below. Freedom is the gift you give yourself. Another act of the self for the self. Because there is no such thing as collective freedom in anything as much as there's no such thing as collective love, or collective harmony, or collective utopia. There's only your freedom. Your way of seeing that even makes the most dire consequences into something immense. Something personal to you that others did not see in it. Now this imperial self, as I said, is defensive. It does not interact with others or have relationships. The self has a relationship only with the self. Otherwise it immediately ceases to be a self. It's like your shadow in a way. It goes where you go. And most people don't think it's possible to have a relationship with oneself. It's still a kind of new concept in this healing mode that we're going through. It even sounds preposterous to most ears. A genuine selfishness, that is, a genuine concern with discovering what is to one's self-interest, an acceptance of the responsibility of achieving it, a refusal ever to betray it by acting on blind whim, mood, impulse, or feeling of the moment, an uncompromising loyalty to one's judgment, convictions, and values represents a profound moral achievement. As I said, this opens the door. This opens the door to the way forward. William Barrett, ruminating more on the work of Heidegger, says, this seriousness is the simple and forthright seriousness of someone who has at last arrived at a center, and who is therefore at last totally engaged in the project of his life, with all that it entails. This person exists under the eye of eternity, and therefore what he does in the moment is absolutely real. That is authenticity. And it's the transcendence, the lightness that we're talking about. You don't do it, you are. We're back to the Nietzsche being, Rollo May's analysis of Nietzsche. Being is a category which cannot be reduced to interjection of social and ethical norms. It is, to use Nietzsche's phrase, beyond good and evil. To the extent that my sense of existence is authentic, it is precisely not what others have told me I should be. See, it's the spirit of rebellion, even attitudinally, even if you can't apply it physically. It is not what others have told me I should be, but is the one Archimedes point that I have to stand on from which to judge what parents and other authorities demand. They can demand it, but you don't have to fulfill it. But that morally superior, centered being, who's imbued with the aestheticism, has no easy job, obviously. And he must defend himself constantly from the barrage, must free himself from others, and then even free them from himself. Remember the dependency? I'm going to be vigilant. If I express my true love and not allowing you to lose your center, I will not allow you to lose your center in my life. If I do so, I am violating sovereignty, my own and yours. Zero tolerance for the lie. Aleister Crowley puts it in the strongest words possible. Because the question arises, is such a man moral in the normal way? Is he virtuous? Crowley says absolutely. Because he sees then that we can never affect anything outside ourselves, save only it is also within us. Whatever I do to another, I do to myself. If I kill a man, I destroy my own life at the same time. Every vibration awakens all others of its own particular pitch. To harm another is to harm oneself, said Socrates. So yes, there is a morality involved. The man is fighting, but he is a moral entity. But this man and his élan vital, his centrality, his moral superiority is the greatest threat to the controllers. Remember, at the very beginning we pointed out what is their greatest threat and how they manipulate the legitimate anxiety is their threat. Now we have another threat. The very existence of this man, his very physical existence, is a deep, deep threat. And so a great deal of the mechanisms and the orcs that they unleash is to stop this very process from taking place. Education, medical, television, media, the lot. They wish to obliterate that person. Or, another way they do it is to make it so stressful to be that kind of person that you go banging at the gates of the global village, let me in, I can't take it out here. Alan Watts says the most strongly enforced of all known taboos is the taboo against knowing who or what you are really behind the mask of your apparently separate, independent, and isolated ego. And Nietzsche says the individual has always had the struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. And he's right, because once you're in that state of ecstasy, they couldn't sell you a god, no matter what kind of costume they dressed it up in, no matter how much incense and mushrooms they throw it. You would just go, this too will pass. You'd be completely in your center. They couldn't throw Jehovah's, what they've got. They couldn't concoct it. They couldn't create that cyber thing they're going to come up with tomorrow. Some octopus, some God knows what. They couldn't create it, that Omega Point malarkey. You'd laugh in its face, go, you drink it. E. Cummings says, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you like everyone else means to fight the hardest battle which any human being has fought and never stop fighting, defensive. Henry Bergson, liberty, right, the French philosopher, liberty consists in being entirely oneself. Which means you have to fight off everything that stops you from doing that. Rand says that men have been taught that it is a virtue to agree with others, but the Creator is the man who disagrees. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to swim with the current, but the Creator is the man who goes against the current. Men have been taught that it's a virtue to stand together, but the Creator is the man who stands alone. And in his standing alone, he's not being hostile and cold and unfriendly and unloving. He is the most loving of men because he refuses to lean and allow others to lean. Viktor Frankl, one of the great existential philosophers, who spoke, and his whole basis of philosophy, psychology, his school of psychology was on bringing meaning from within oneself. He says everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of his human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose his own way. But we don't want to do that. We want to follow the misguided because we'll do anything than do the shadow work and walk us across the road. So we'll follow fools who are only too happy to lead us. We put them into business. I've said on umpteen occasions, one of the heart of my work, that we are really doing holy work when we do this very subject, this conspiracy, alternative, I don't care what label you give it. It is not separate from consciousness. It is absolutely the holy work. It is absolutely the shrine. It is absolutely the study. It is the prayer, the mantra. This very investigation of what we are and what we've become. It is know thyself. The Persian writer, or I think it's Lebanese writer, Mikhail Naimi, a friend of Khalil Gibran, he said, the man who cannot find a temple in his heart can never find his heart in any temple. It starts with yourself. And of course, if it was only the matter of some external adversary, then, well, we wouldn't be having this talking. You know, we might even win. What not? For all you know. But this is so much more subtle than that. It's been saying from the beginning. What we're discussing is actually soul making. Building the monastery, the shrine of your own heart. So that no matter what kind of gulag they produce in the world, you are above it anyway. Thomas Sa says that people often say that this or that person has not found himself. But the self is not something one finds, it is something one creates. There is your new religion. And that is what puts you, as an individual, self-contained, sovereign. The World Bank isn't going to rethink it and give you sovereignty. The Federal Reserve goes, I think it'll be a good idea, let's give them sovereignty. Only you can give yourself sovereignty. It will never come. They're never going to do it. Nobody can, not even the most closest person to you. No God can do it. Only you can activate it if you want to do so. You are here in this world to create your own soul or your spirit, whatever language you want to use. And you are actually doing it. Carl Gustav Jung puts it in this way: although the self is my origin, it is also the goal of my quest. The Ouroboros, remember? The great where are we? London, my God, this man died in this town. Talk about way of seeing. John Keats, he says, call the world, if you please, the veil of soul making, and then you will find out the use of the world. Another law, certainty, which they haven't taught us, is that truth is the most destructive thing there is. It's worse than any plutonium or what you can imagine. It is literally the deconstructor. Truth is the most destructive thing there is because it will not tolerate anything but the truth. Civilization is the act of setting man free from man. Thinking is destructive. Man thinks. That deserves our worship. I've described it as a chemical divorce. Everybody's heard of chemical weddings. There's one little bad news about that too. You can't have the chemical wedding until you first go through a thing called chemical divorce. And that nobody wants to do. Well, then don't tell me about the other. Returning to the self, to the single vision, to the now, requires this chemical divorce, a divestiture of illusion and dependency. It's purely apophatic and deconstructive process. You know, like Sophocles' quote, that nothing enters the life of humans without a curse. That means you have to get into relationship with that negation, that deconstruction. Only by the painstaking elimination of the untruth can we know the truth. The old alchemists would put it this way: bodies cannot be changed except by reduction to their first matter. That is the law. You cannot argue with that. That is absolutely inviolate, built into the universe. We can fight against it, find all sorts of backdoors and technological nonsense to try and, you know, subvert it. No chance. This is that journey between life, death, and rebirth. This is this act of death and resurrection. The ego must allow itself to be embraced by the imperial self. Right? We're in this position where we want to grab it. That's impossible. That ball is going to float out in water no matter how many times you try to grab it. But if you stay still enough, it might come in of its own accord. In other words, walk with that legitimate anxiety. Don't anesthetize, right, or karate kick the other side of the anxiety because you know what's going to happen to you. This is a message to take to the world, that if you try to anesthetize or sedate, as they're desperately trying to do through their advertising and the multi-billion pharmaceutical industry, if they amp up the illegitimate topical anxiety to such a degree as you're now seeing, the danger is that you are going to lose yourself. You will lose the very attendant to the life, death, and rebirth process. And all concepts of spirituality and owning oneself and living a whole life are dead, and they're waiting for that, because that is the mud that builds the bricks of the global village. These things, life and death, are woven fine. We divide them, you know, loving one to fear the other. We put death off to the future. But life gives rise to death, and death gives rise to life. It's our way of seeing that really needs changing. It's a process of deconstruction. Heidegger put it this way: the most thought-provoking thing in our thought-provoking time is that we're still not thinking. He's talking there about that totality that included the body. Ponty was the one who gave it more expression than Heidegger did, but Heidegger was certainly saying that, of the totality, which he really referred to as the word care. You wouldn't use these other religious terms and these other romantic terms because they've been so loaded with the lie. He used other terms, dwelling, right? And the whole concept of being in the world. But Jung knew, he's a psychologist, he's picking up the pieces. He goes, oh, they'll get it all right when the crutches and props are broken and no cover from the rear offers even the slightest hope of security. Does it become possible for us to experience an archetype that up until then is laying hidden? This is the archetype of meaning. As I said, it's not going to come forward. That dark angel, if you will, isn't going to come forward into the light until the right combination. And if you think that dialoguing with other people and Sai Ananda Wanda over there is going to tell you what the combination is, you'll waste your whole life and put them, the dirtiest tyrants, in power over you and over others. The priests, the mushroom heads, are in power because we've just been doing that. Why are we not doing this? Because we're at an infantile level, as I said before. We're at the beginning stages. The trauma was recent. But as Blake said, there's always a silver lining. The fool who persists in his folly becomes wise. So much confidence he had, they said, just giving these fools enough time, believe it or not, they'll come to understanding. Just keep doing the stupid things you're doing. And by deconstruction and by, what's the term? Exclusion or whatever it is. We're in magical child syndrome. We're in animism. We're in the pleasure principle. We're in the Illuminati must be destroyed, not the inner tyrant. We've got time for that. We're not involved in that seriousness that Barrett was talking about. We're not authentic. We are sedated. We don't act from this elan vital, this will to power. We have no inner dialogue, right? We do repress ourselves and suppress others, and we are immersed in the collective. Right? You know what that means? We are you, I am who I am, etc. All that is I'm in the same mess you're in. Isn't that just wonderful? You're in the same mess I'm in, and I'm in the same mess you're in. Hey, let's have a beer together. Let's get married. I'm existentially naked, so are you. I'm selfless, so are you. Let's get on eHarmony and date. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We are you, the paper mache creature. What's that Mark Burgess song? We're not in Manchester, sorry, London. I can hear them calling down to me, rows and rows of faces on a balcony, come up here and set us free. Yeah, freedom, a new phenomenon. Kings and masters and lords were needed in the past. We don't think about what to do. You tell us what to do, and if we obey, we get rewarded. It's the best system ever. Global Village number 2 is on its way. Human 2.0 is on its way. What the hell, subjectivity? I don't even like my own emotions. Can we drug them out? Yes, we can. Thank you. I'm in first in line. Psychological insight, enlightenment, introspection? No, I'm not interested. Just in the same way that we've handled all this other rubbish. Remember that centrality idea? So that religions have handed us this lunatic idea of a remote, separate, individualized God sitting somewhere behind the clouds, who's omniscient, omnipotent, who's up there, separate, divided, abstract. When in fact there is such an energy as the God energy, but it's now, as I say, we're in a good time. The quantum science have proved it, right? The chaos theory, Gaia theory, whatever theory you want to talk about, they've even proved it, that this thing is an ambient intelligence, never forgetting that it includes the body. It is plastic. It is everywhere. It is all pervasive. It is intelligent, all permeating. Tennyson said, nearer is it than breathing and closer than hands and feet. It's not a centralized, right? It's not centralized, it's ambient. Or in the language of the, who is it? The David Bohms, it's enfolded, implicate, as opposed to explicate. It's enfolded within in its own self. He's basically just borrowing concepts from Blake, William Blake. But Nietzsche explains why we've got this monkey business. He says there's always been sickly people among those who invent fables and long for God. They have a raging hatred for the enlightened man and for that youngest of virtues, which is called honesty. No virtue. Now we come to the final section, guys, where we condense things and we hit the more deeper, more meaningful solutions. Still bearing in mind what we're doing, except we've expanded tyranny to be action we do to ourselves. Yeah? I hope we've had a better understanding of this concept of tyranny anyway. And the kind of psychic community we must develop, the kind of new way of seeing that we need to inculcate, and what it will entail to do that, and what we might even receive from doing it. In overview, as we wind down, we've looked at the ancestral trauma factor, which is, as I said, co-opted by architects of control. They know what we don't know, and that we're in pieces psychologically. With the fragmentation of consciousness, and that fragmentation can be defined as the imperial self rivaling the ego or pseudo-self, and that they've got two different realities. And we even find if you factor in what Wilhelm Reich, plug in the Reichian theories, and you've got that this ego can now be defined as the human flesh itself, the very skin, the endless bioenergy. They knew it because they used to have on healing to people. That's how they healed the ego. See, Freud and all the other psychologists talk to you. Reich said, no, that's got to go. We would deal with the body as the ego. That's why it's one of the greatest healing systems physically as well. They work with the bioenergy of the body. Built on Freud, but much more powerful. Then we looked at this amazing concept of the antipathy to nature, a seed, a demonic, monstrous, but understandable, nucleated, immense animosity that's so repressed and non-conscious, but towards the very thing that we should have the greatest relationship with, and they co-opted that as well. We looked at that. And that can be considered, if not the major root of pathology, at least one of the most major roots of it. And certainly one of the major roots of the cocktails of disorders. We looked at the ubiquitous collectivism and extroversion, the pulling outwards into the Unterwelt and Mitwelt. And that implies the dependency on approval. And more importantly, if you don't get it, because we often don't get what we want, then I'm a neurotic. I have deep anxiety when they just don't think I'm wonderful. And ultimately culminating in total self-hate, shame, guilt, masochism, self-murder, doesn't matter what you call it. And this amazing concept of how, if we don't watch this, that we throw out our own legitimate, because we've done it, white magic, black magic, no, they're doing white magic, you're doing the work for them. And now to the absolute core of this session on solutions. How do you untie the whole thing? Where is that scimitar? Where is that sword of Elendil? Where is it? Where is that Excalibur? How do you go back to the beginning without regression? One aspect, go back to nature. Go back and talk to your best friend. Because if she starts talking back, you won't want to be bothered with anything else. Your pack will fall from your back, and if you're wearing rags, you won't even notice it. Christ said, go without script nor purse. Because once you're in that enchantment, nothing else matters. How can you say that's a loveless person? How could you say that? So, the nexus of it, the absolute beating heart of this thing, is a thing that I refer to as the value of values, or the virtue of virtues, a supreme virtue. What is it? It's simply this. Borrowed from the existential psychologist, it is simply the value of existence. We hinted at it slightly in the very beginning. We have an unhealthy relationship to death as we put it off and talk about mortality. As the Heidegger and their being unto death crap, it's never worked. It's a fundamental of existential philosophy, but even it doesn't work for a lot of people. They go, yeah, well, even if I do think about my death, I just kind of feel morbid about that. No, he's not talking about being morbid about it and obsessed about it. He's talking about realizing the simple certainty, you didn't create yourself and you're going to die. And if you really deeply contemplate that finitude and that mortality, it enriches your existence. You can even type it into the internet, being unto death, or Martin Heidegger, or whatever, existential being unto death, and they will explain this. that the concept that you are not going to be here, right, and finitude, that you have a past or future in a moment of expiration. Kierkegaard, Heidegger, these people, Nietzsche, they understood that that is one of the hallmarks that will enrich and give vividness and immediacy to even the mundane. And most of the scholars and writers and painters and poets at the time grabbed it and went with it, and that's why we have some of the great literature we have, the Hermann Hesses, the D.H. Lawrences, you name it, the Rilkes, because they understood what these people were talking about. But the only trouble is we are so morbid and so evading of this point that that even doesn't work, because we just don't do it. We always think of death in something of a morbid way. But the thing is that this lack of virtue, this lack of this virtue, which is the virtue that arises from the value of values, the value of existence, is the supreme root of all pathology, psychic or social. It's overarching, it's all-encompassing. Because it is ultimately, as they say, it is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Having this is the fulcrum that, remember in the movie Dune at the end, he goes, I will bend like a wind in the reed, a reed in the wind. And he flips, and the prince succeeds. He kills his adversary. That martial art, that Aikido, is connected in this understanding of unlocking this matrix. Literally, simply, without sledgehammers, with great deftness. Now, the man with this virtue is morally superior. He is the true individual, the true self. He alone brings meaning from within himself. He has no master above, no slave below. His relationship with pain and loss is different. He's not swayed by what others think, say, and do. He's enlightened. He's that feather. What you say, think, and do, I hear it, I know it, but I'm not going to be emotionally and psychologically traumatized by what you're doing. You are traumatized by it. I am not. Is he moral? As we said, yes, he is. Because he does not blindly, he's not immoral because he, like Nietzsche, won't follow a bunch of useless, contrived rules and regulations. His edict, as Crowley said, is because he will not harm another because it's to harm himself. The Socratic approach. So he's deeply moral. In fact, he's morally superior. And that's why he's a threat to those who are his antithesis on this planet. If things go wrong in the world, says Gustav Jung, this is because something is wrong with the individual, because something is wrong with me. Therefore, if I am sensible, I shall put myself right first. For this I need, because no outside authority no longer means anything to me, and knowledge of the innermost foundations of my being, in order that I may base myself firmly on the eternal facts, right, the certainties of the human psyche. But nobody can walk that road with you, as I can't stand on the same ground that you occupy. Now this totality of knowing, this totality of action, and the consequence, the kind of thinking that comes with this virtue of virtue, the ultimate virtue of the understanding of the value of your existence, the complexion of your personality, your psychology, was summarized by Nietzsche in the very well-known phrase, but my God, how misinterpreted phrase, the will to power. The will to power is an élan vital, a life force, an attitude, a way of seeing, born out of the aesthetic awe that started all reason. And that started all mathematics, concepts, inquiry, investigation, curiosity. The being who's involved with this, who's empowered with this, directs the will to power first and foremost towards himself. But they didn't tell you that, did they, when they give you the Nietzsche class? They're keeping on telling you he's going to put this will to power into the hands of some tyrant who's going to use it on everybody else. No, that's in a bunch of people who are pseudo-Nietzscheans who came later. Nietzsche himself said that the will to power must always be, and first be, directed towards a person's own inner being, to deconstruct the lies, to have the zero tolerance for the lie. And also to do that because you're cleaning the garden, you're cleaning away the weeds because you know what's coming. You're cleaning the cup because you want it to be ever filled. You're doing that Taoist work of keeping the space there so that you can accomplish without action. Because another kind of action is taking place, a totality. And it's not purely mental or purely emotional, it's total or aesthetic. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, if you have gained this within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have this within you, what you do will not What you do have in you will kill you. Another translation of this is to bring that thing from within you out will save you, to not bring it out will destroy you. What thing? Well, we can't do that. Nobody can do it. Existentially mutilated and vacant, just as Big Brother wants it to be. All those other syndromes, right? Suicide, self-destruction, futility, meaningless, depression. Simple depression of saying, I got no past, I got no future, I can't get out of this, there's no hope. Do you know how that gets cracked? It's cracked, or it's not cracked, because the person, obviously, is unable to be aware that the bad news is, the world isn't meant to turn you on. Where did you ever get that idea? The world isn't meant to give you meaning, and other people aren't there to give you meaning, by the way. And if you really even unpack that, you'll realize that that's a pretty tyrannical need of yours to be fulfilled by anyone else, or even the world for that matter. Meaning comes from within. You're here to build your own soul. And many people who just snap into that, as has happened, they got it, and they never are depressed again, not in the same way. That's right, meaning has to come from within myself, if I'm capable of doing it. That cracks the depression. But as long as you remain fixed to this idea that, she's going to do it, he's going to do it, they're going to do it, we, us and our, it'll never happen. And we finish on children, because we've seen something all through this talk about the inner state of man and his penchant for evasion and criminality and destructiveness. We can't finish with man's criminal history without the felonies he does towards those who are the future. To fill his own inner void, right? To keep him distracted and evaded, he gives birth, no less. To crutches, no less. And gives them false love, no less. So that they'll conform to say, yes, master, me slave. Remember that term, adultism? Governmentality, total institution? Osho says that everybody is living in bondage because everybody who has brought you up wanted that power over you, to enjoy the mastery over you. And children are the most helpless people in this world, the most exploited class. It is not the proletariat who are the most exploited class. It is not the women who are the most exploited class. It is the children who are the most exploited class. And here you sit, because this happened to you. You would not be here, not one bum on one seat here. This is not the biography of everyone sitting here. And everyone in the sound, who hears the sound of my voice. You are these children who have been exploited, and who have made a decision to not exploit others. Saying, I will not take this lie. I have the courage to accept a different way, and I have zero tolerance for this bullshit. I will not be party to it. You are that child. Everyone in this room is that child. Who's fallen in love with the world, no. Because it's the most spiritual word in the human language, along with imagination. Robert Bly, in the fine book Iron John, he says that the possessiveness that mothers typically exercise on sons, not to mention the possessiveness that fathers typically exercise on daughters, can never be underestimated. Adultism, look it up. Think I'm joking? You want a pet? You got one. I got a problem with it even with dogs, actually, to tell you the truth. What's this? What's this? But you know something, the new leads, have you seen the new ones? They're really long. Those ones that retractable leads? They're longer than the ones for the kitties. The dog can go further, really far. I've actually seen this guy lives near where I'm staying. He's got a huge one. This little thing goes runs and runs and runs. The kid is like here 4 feet away. Because adult doesn't want it out of sight. The secret to the children is manifold, of course. I think the first thing to look at is that to awaken within them that aesthetic sense. Oh, guess what? They've already got it, by the way. Get out of the way is what more to the point. But functionally, since you have to go out into their world. You're not their world. The world is their world. Introduce them to it. Stand back and let them go into it. Let the dialogue begin. They came into this world. You brought them into this world as somebody brought you into this world. You have one thing in common with your children, that world. Why are you hiding them from it? Let them see all of nature's sides, the good and the bad. Let them point. Don't provide answers, for God's sake. Don't educate them. That's already happening. You don't know what they're going to become. Introduce them to animals without coercion or censorship. Observe what comes out of them naturally. Some kids will be slower, good, that's meant to be, that's fine. Doesn't matter what the headmaster thinks. Don't let them build a wall. Those kids who fight you, they're doing right most of the time. They divorce you because you're a fool. They don't like what they see. You're in the way. Their rebellion is always good. Crime is not, but rebellion is always good. But we don't want to see that. We want to suppress. So awaken them to those seasons and phases. Let them watch it. Let them see what's going on. Take them out into nature and let them form their own relationship with it. And do what Hegel said ancient man did, what Nietzsche said we all did, with the whole... What are you doing like that? You're saying, I'm taking this child back to the beginning of the beginnings. That happened to the whole human race. They can replicate it as you can replicate it. We've talked about that already. They can replicate it. And just stare at it. Untrammeled, unmolested, uncensored. Allow them to develop a one-to-one relationship with inanimate things, not just human beings. That's the secret of all the problems that they're going to inherit. Because as I said, you want to have certainties. You want to root them into certainties. Once you've done that, once you've let them see the miracle of all of nature's sides, aren't they going to naturally be able to compare that without your help to the world that man has created and probably come up with the right conclusions and be then the people who are going to go and fix it for the right? There's your healing. There's your solution. The other thing to emphasize when it comes to children is this thing called discernment. It ties into the thing I've elaborated on before, but we've never got this deep. And that is that one good thing on our side is that evil contains within it the seeds of its own destruction. It has an Achilles heel. There was a Tuesday where somebody else asked me to elaborate it on an interview, and I wouldn't do it because it was, it has to be in context. And I told him, I said, look, it has to be in context. Now we're at that point. The context is that the Achilles heel and the seeds of its own destruction is this simple fact. All things that are evil don't present themselves as evil, do they? Their penchant is to hide. Their penchant is to hide behind a mask. They use the principle of sheep and wolves clothing. But that's the weakness, isn't it? That is the sheep, that is the Achilles heel. Because if you are smart enough to tell the difference between a wolf and a sheep, evil's fought. And that is it. And the term for that is discernment. And since we kind of don't have it, and the children who are being born right now definitely don't have it, but could have it, discernment provides an important key. And it also is a timely thing, because in 1 or 2 generations, if the discernment is inculcated, and again I emphasize, they already have it. Step out of the way when they say, Mommy, I don't like that person. Oh, but you gotta be nice, smile, the monkman. The child already knows until we get in there and pummel it to death with the social bullshit. Right? So get out of the way, and it will have the discernment, and it'll be a bodily discernment as well as a mental one. And those higher centers will open, and the inner voices will be loud. And in a short generation, by the time they raise their kids with the same principle, evil is starved to death. Evil is literally has malnutrition. Evil withers away on its own from this thing called discernment. And then the 10 children, as the movie Dune and the book Dune shows, those 10 children can train 100. Those 100 train 1,000. Those 1,000 go and train tens of thousands. And evil cannot find a place to act. It packs up, it withers, it goes. The host has realized that it's hosting a parasite. The parasite has no chance of survival. The children are the future. And discernment must be inculcated in them, or at least we get out of the way and let the process happen. And what you can do is simply keep the kids away from those who obscure this ability. I've always said that watching TV can strengthen discernment if you know what you're doing. Although I say for the very young, you probably don't want to have them watch it. But if you watch it with intelligence, you're all right. But once the ability is quelled in the beginning, once you don't awaken it, they never can get it again. Remember, when I was a child, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. When I grew, it went away, gone, it was so uncomfortably numb. I turned to look and it was gone. I cannot put my finger on. The child was grown, the dream was gone. That's what he's talking about. The magic slipped away. And then no matter what life hands you as surrogate to that, what does it matter? You've lost. The most precious thing. And we're stealing it from the children. Because it's very hard to reawaken again. Better to have a kid who's rude, rebellious, and hostile than a polite ignoramus. Open to evil and even going out and generating evil. R.D. Lang says, without the most thorough and rapid brainwashing, their mind would see through our dirty tricks. Children are not yet fooled, but we turn them into imbeciles like ourselves, with high IQs if possible. Specifically, this devastation is largely the work of violence that has been perpetrated on each of us, and by each of us on ourselves. The usual name that much of this violence goes under is love. The biggest deceit. Realize those children know totally, they have total intelligence. That's what a child is. Their centers of intelligence are wide open. But we drug the hell out of them. Hell, they're even now physically drugging them to crush that natural intelligence, to crush that spirit of rebellion, repressing our voice to secure the false love, right? Never letting them know you turn within, you know. You have to turn within. And also teaching them the fact that there's no external love. It has to be inculcated within, the love within. These are certainties. The child who's going to be the builder of the future, to bring down all this monstrous evil, is the child that you help to awaken discernment and the aesthetic sense. Because what are you doing when you awaken that virtue of virtues? Right? If we turn to the other thing, death, mortality, that morbid thing that children are never meant to know about, but they're smarter than you, they actually do notice and do know about it, but they also notice your evasion. That's where it goes wrong. The other thing to do is to introduce the child to death as early as possibly. Obviously not in a morbid way or an obsessed way and sit and watch the latest Friday the 13th movie. But at times of funeral, at times of passing, animals will die. So you will find that it's natural. Leaves falling, winters, the seasons changing. What just happened with his death? Or showing pictures of the grandparents, well, they're no longer with us. What do you mean they're dead? When you introduce, and do it without invasion, do it without explanation. Let it come from within. Negentropia, let it come from within. You'll be amazed what will happen. Because the child will now be introduced to what? That life terminates in death, that there's finitude, mortality. Right? That winter comes after the summer. And that you will see basically two responses in children. You will basically see two responses. You will see, let's move to it. I'll come back to these in a minute. Here it is. You will either see the narcissistic, hedonistic reaction. Oh my God, life ends in death. Well, I better have the best life and party on down, you know, with what life I've got. And that's your narcissistic, insane creature that rules the world today. That's the decision, the contract that they've arrived at. The socially programmed automaton, basically, and the hedonistic, narcissistic creature. Or the flowering that I'm talking about. The child that does what Heidegger is asking, what Nietzsche is talking about, flowers the value of values. The value of the existence that it has while it is here. And that child is rooted in the ultimate certainty and is the true human being, the true sapiens sapiens. Because it's introduced to this human finitude. Now, of course, the hedonist version knows that it just can't go rampaging around as a hedonist. So what does it do? We all know. It disguises itself in the camouflage of politics and religion. That's where we find so many of these creatures in those things, because it has to disguise itself. It has to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So politics and religion and places where they can wield their power and authority, obviously, are knee-deep in these people. So the introduction to mortality is absolutely crucial. Jacob Boehme, the ancient alchemist, theologist, he said, "He who dies not before he dies is ruined when he dies." You must visit life and death together, and you must also bring the children into understanding it, not morbidly, and then watch who this child is. Watch what they decide with their life. Because that child will either act hedonistically, as I said, or will cultivate this value of values. And those children are the ones who are the true indigos, or whatever you want to call it, who have the power to banish the devils from this earth. These are the philosophical certainties, and your child must be rooted in it, so that it's unwavered by the gales and storms and whatever it might meet when it has to deal then with the Umwelt and Mitwelt. These are the philosophical certainties. What are they? We did not create ourselves. We're not ready-made beings. We start as one thing and we'll develop into something else. We mature biologically and psychologically over time. We learn that we will be different as time passes. Right? The child hears parents speaking about, what life is going to be when they're older. So change is implicit. And then they learn more deeply that death terminates life. That time becomes more serious then, not frivolous. So the relationship with time has changed. That's what this virtue is part of. Your relationship with time has changed. You become serious. Not in a morbid way, but in that seriousness, the center of seriousness. You become open and aware of a lot of things that other people miss. You do notice the pavement under your feet at the time. You do now notice the handle of the door. You are aware of what things are doing when you walk in this state. But of course, we see time in negative terms as a certainty we have no power over. And we react in certain ways, and it's those reactions that are very, very important to watch. I emphasize that. Because this action of introducing into mortality and finitude, as morbid as it sounds in the beginning, initially, is what will happen to limit their evasion during their life. You want to shrink time down to limit evasion. In the early days, once this is inculcated and you don't turn the child away from the questions of death, they will not be as evasive. They will not be as shallow. They will deepen their awareness of the preciousness of life and make every minute count. And they will emphasize being as opposed to just doing. Not that doing is wrong, but the center of gravity, the vision will change. The doing and the being. Remember, deeds of doing are measured by the clock, just as we have to also do them in harmony with other people, and we justify our doing deeds. Basically, what you know as time is a measure of the doing. Being is an activity, if you even want to call it that is completely confined to the moment, to the present. It's not subject to past and future. It's right now. You have to be in this moment, and only in this moment. And therefore, that's another thing that's beyond time. Just as the physical body we analyzed logically is beyond time, subject-object is nucleated, right? Transcended. So, by the act of being, you also are transcending time. Because it's not of the past. You can't be yesterday and be tomorrow. You have to be now and be conscious of being so. In fact, even as children, time moves more slowly for us. We know that time changes based on moods. When you're happy or you're melancholic or depressed or reflective, jubilant, time seems to change, doesn't it? Oh, that was a really short weekend. Bloody, I wish it had gone on longer. So this is what the human being has as part of its consciousness is different than animals. Animals have no sense of mortality. They don't sit there wondering, oh my God, mortality, gee, what can I do about it? They don't know that they're going to age. They don't project desires into a future. They have no expectations of what's going to happen. They don't imagine what they're one day going to be. And also, they can't intensify by will their own existence. We can do all of those things. We have the imagination and the ability to modulate and change the very existence that we have. Not only is the child going to be in the center of the certainties, they will turn their whole thought, and then when you speak in Heidegger's terms, thought is so much different than what we think. He's talking about that totality. In fact, he even etymologically showed you that what he really means when he says thought is gratitude. That every thought is a perfume, a total fragrance of gratitude for the miracle of existence. Go deeper, deeper into mortality, deeper into aesthetics, until it's so rich that it's like molasses. It's like something immense. A great pearl of great price dug up from the bottom of the sewer where they threw it. That your very totality of consciousness becomes an act of gratitude, right? For its existence, the value of values. When that value of value is not, you can do it, as we said, as an adult. But once it's not in the child, they are going to be, you basically, ultimately, to be brutal about it, failed as a parent. Don't take it personally. Because it's an overthought, or it's an oversight. But you've now basically made more chances that that child is going to be buffeted and enter the world as an existentially vacant person. May not happen, but it also is more likely to happen. Because these are certainties. Man dies, being unto death. And therefore the child should be introduced to it as non-morbidly and non-obsessively and non-fearfully as early as possible in the most healthiest way. Because it's at that moment that that ancestral inner deepest voice of gratitude that is not happening, it's not activated in most of us. will be activated, and life will be completely then true life. It will be truly scintillating. What's the alternative? Evil has within it the seeds of its own destruction. That's the alternative. The false can't sustain itself. The false is terminal. And if you happen to be programmed by the false, thinking like the false, you're in danger. The global village is waiting for you to make you extinct. Yes, sir. Permission to live, permission to think, permission to exist. Illusion is ephemeral, law, inviolate, cannot be negotiated. So if your program, the Course in Miracles made it very clear, if your thinking is programmed by the unreal, it will pass away. Prahalaya. Crowley puts it this way: anyone who is forced from his own course, either through not understanding himself or through external imposition, comes into conflict with the order of the universe and suffers accordingly. Inviolate, cannot be argued around. Even when you have all the stimulation and pleasures, I'm going to do good life, I'm going to have a bit of fun. No, nonsense. Nonsense. Inwardly, you are in knots. And when we don't have that certainty, when we're not coming from that place, when we are diverted from that course of action, we will suffer. We are going to be anxious. We will be on an endless quest and sullied by every encounter with these fates. And unfortunately, we also then inherit this to the newborn. We inherit, we bequest this to the ones who are to come after us. Fromm says that the fact that millions of people share the same vices does not make them virtuous. And the fact that they share so many errors does not make those errors to be truths. And the fact that millions of people share the same forms of mental pathology doesn't make them sane. Even if they're all saying, we're all one, t-shirts, and living in the global village, singing their Pepsi songs, come and dance with us. Right? We're in an unsane world to which we need psychic immunity. 70 summers is what most people will say. 70. 28,000 days is what we've got. So it's not about the days, is it then? Obviously, even the child will start, as I say, the child's action will start to work this out as it grows. So it's not really about the days then. I was kind of traumatized about that. That's kind of arises fear in me. I've had some sweaty nights thinking about it. But you know something, I realized something else. It's not really about the time, is it? It's about the quality, the way I live it. Yeah, it's just transcended time right there. Didn't need the guru. No mushroom heads required. The value of value awakens. Osiris rises. The value of values can enter you at any time whenever you want to do the work. But no one but yourself can awaken it. The self can only act for unto itself. And also, ultimately, if you don't want to awaken it, that is perfectly fine too. The harmony of the universe still goes on. Life goes on regardless. And that is the certainty that a morally superior person also relies on. We've touched upon many things, certainties that a morally superior person knows, like evil having within it the seed of its own destruction and so on. But the morally superior person also knows if the rest of the world doesn't get it, and I don't necessarily want to run in their scaffolding when they're falling, because I might be preventing them from getting it by buffering them from falling. Maybe the fall is the thing that they need to have. We need to remember that for the times that are coming right now in our lives. But the man who's morally superior may also rely on that fact, that the false passes away, and it's okay to not have people awaken this, because that's where they are. That is their bliss at that moment in time, and it's all right. And he goes on the journey on his own path because he's so involved in that and what it's doing to him. He's okay because he's touching that other noumena. He's aware that that is eternal. As we said, the eternal note, right? The eternal string of which the other two are merely voices that can come and go. Schopenhauer talked about it. He understood this deeply. And he put it in a very, very succinct, simple language. He says, consciousness is certainly destroyed at death, as is the body, to be sure, but that which has been producing it is by no means destroyed. And the metaphor that I always use is about a match. He's saying that when you strike this match, which is the matter, think of the sulfur, the candle, the wax, or the match itself as the body, as this finite thing, right, being unto death. It can only burn a certain time. You strike it and this amazing thing appears, this magical thing called light, the flame. This bioenergy appears. Where the hell did it come from? And then you say, well, the match is just burned down, but I can light another one. Then I can light another one, another one, another one. I can fill the whole planet with matchsticks. I can fill the whole universe with matchsticks. And what has happened? The flame that came on the first match is not even one single iota reduced. So in your way of seeing, are you going to be identifying with the matchstick or the flame? He's saying that the consciousness can be destroyed, this blip, this ripple in the water, right? But that's an illusion, because that which has been doing the work to bring it into existence is absolutely eternal. There is no death, except in the way that we've described. Another level of this, that the spirit of nature is eternal. And Blake called it the single vision. And we'll end today with this great man's words. But here we see another metaphor that I like to use. And that is that this process of coming to this state, call it moral superiority, call it the aesthetic ability, whatever you want to call it, it's the still point. For thousands of years, the Vedic Arya described the whole of the other conundrum, the whole other thing of life as a wheel, right? It's the national symbol of India. The wheel of samsara is often called. On a wheel, yeah, sure. The births, the lives, the deaths, whatever you want to call it, moves, spins, the chaos of the world, the chaos of the mid-belt and the mid-belt. But again, the good news is that the hub is still. So if you can find your way right into the center of that hub, you find the still point. But nobody can find it but yourself. And this reminds me of the journey of Amundsen, Roald Amundsen. When he finally did the immense journey and was the first man to arrive, where? At the middle of the South Pole. His colleagues wanted him to make a speech. And he stood there for a few minutes, and he said, you know, now that I'm here after this immense journey, unbelievable. It was a race with that psycho Scott. They finally get there, and he goes, I don't feel very big. In fact, I feel quite small, but not in a bad way. I feel humble. Very simple, very still. So all this running around trying to be a big shot on the red carpet and the big celeb and everything, the men who actually go there to that 0 degrees latitude, 0 degrees longitude of the physical continent are in a state of what Heidegger called the care. A wordless place. Simple, straight, direct, wordless, but yet mighty in that simplicity, in that humility, in that limitation. Not the limitation of the man who goes down empty, fill me, but the man who has achieved great things. But that comes with his own humility. Look up at the immensity, right? This will come with the aesthetic sense right away when you look up at the majesty of what you have around you and you know you didn't create it. Well, that's what he was being imbued with, and it came to him, and he didn't have a speech. Well, there was a 0 degrees longitude and 0 degrees latitude of consciousness also. The fountain of Lamnet, the fountain at the center of it all. The 0 degrees latitude, 0 degrees longitude, the center of the wheel of Chirasi, and only you can find it. It's like the littleness that Heidegger talked about. It's completely different than the neurotic kind, because it's born from this aesthetic. You're little, but you know you're part of the greater. It's not the neurotic one where it's shivering under the staircase of the mansion thinking it's separate, I can't join in, everything's alienated. It's a littleness that suddenly realizes when you look at all of that immensity, and you do it through aesthetic eyes, that we did not create that. That means, by the way, we are guests in this house. And the Druidic teaching was, yes, you are, and your job in this life is to leave the house in a better place than you found it, if you can. At least leave it in no worse a place. Because that's not being a very good house guest, and there may be a price to pay for that action. So as I said, we will conclude with the wise words of William Blake. When the doors of perception are cleansed, man sees things as they truly are, infinite. I hope we've done that today, had some clearing and cleansing and understanding, a kind of knowingness, an ability to perceive the infinite. And also that we are part of that infinite, because here's the last thing to say. It's perception again. If you can perceive, right, if your way of vision is larger or narrower, doesn't matter which. And if your very perception can grasp the infinite, doesn't it mean that the perceiver is as infinite as the thing he's perceiving, and that is also nucleated? You are that infinite, infinity, I am that infinity. Open it, remember it, dialogue with it, never let a single person make you doubt it. And as Heidegger said, make every thought you think an act of thank you, an act of gratitude. And I'll add mine at the end. Thank you all for being here and being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that, guys. That was absolutely monumental, and a big thank you to everybody for really making the effort and coming down here. I know some of you have travelled from afar to be here, so yeah, stay in touch with us on either of the websites, icanplanet.com, or on Michael's website, michaeltsarion.com. Sign up for the newsletters and stay in touch. And all the best, guys. Safe journey home. Good night. Michael Tsarion.